Well, good morning on this crisp Sunday morning. It's plenty cool out there and snowing like crazy. But remember, through all this, this is the day the Lord's made. We'll rejoice and be glad in it. Now, as you saw in our text, that is in the video, and by the way, many people say, well, what would Jesus do? You know that WWJD, that went around a long time ago. They also say, what would Jesus say? Well, I'll be honest with you, this is not what Jesus would say if he were here. This is what he is saying to us because he is here. Jesus Christ is more than just a historical figure. He's the living God. He tells us in Matthew chapter 18, verse 20, for where two or three are gathered together in my name, I'm there in the midst of them. Now, it's evident to me that the challenges and conflicts of the first church are absent from the church today. Well, at least here in the United States. Now, other places like Western Africa and India and places like that, it's still going on, and I'm convinced that it's like the first church was. Matter of fact, we support a missionary that is he has an organization called Christians Teaching Christians. His name's Bob Belitho, unique individual, and I love him dearly. But let me tell you, he got a report from one of his coordinators in Nigeria that in Nigeria there is an average of 17 Christians that are killed, most of them beheaded, every day in Nigeria. Man, you need to understand that we in America, we think we're being crucified or really something bad happening to us if somebody slams the door in our face or laughs at us or calls us names and things like that. Hey, they're in the trenches over there. Now then, here's what I'm leading up to. We need to do what we're supposed to do. And the church in America, and I'm not talking about just our church, I'm talking about all churches, aren't doing it. Peter Marshall described the modern Christian as deep sea divers encased in suits designed to go many fathoms deep, marching bravely to pull plugs out of bathtubs. Now, I'm convinced that not only must we return to the message of Jesus Christ, which I trust, I haven't left it. I trust that the message that I deliver is the message of Jesus Christ. But also, we must return to the methods of Jesus Christ. And that's where we're lacking. We're not doing things as Jesus did or as he would do. Now, we need to expand our focus. In verse 36 of our text, it says, but when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them. Notice, first of all, he saw the multitudes. We must acquire a vision for the multitude of lost people around us. And also, we must be moved with compassion for them. Now, listen. How do we look at our neighbor? How do we look at the checkout clerk at the store? Or those at the game, if you're at a football. We went to a basketball game last night that was very entertaining, I'll just say that. They were little kids, and a bunch of the kids in our church were playing basketball on both teams. And it was a lot of fun. But how do we look at those at the game, those spectators? How about those that we work with? How do we see them? Do we see them just as a co-laborer, or do we see them as someone that possibly needs Christ? Are we moved with compassion toward their soul? Are we brokenhearted over them or over the lost? Psalm 126 verses 5 and 6 says, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy. He who continually goes forth weeping, bearing seeds for sowing, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him." Let me ask you this. Why do you suppose Jesus was moved with compassion? Well, he tells us, because they were weary. That word weary is ekluo, and it's to grow weary. Matter of fact, I think a better definition besides grow weary, and it's also part of the definition, is to be helpless. You see, they were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. And in Isaiah chapter 53, we're told, all we, like sheep, have gone astray. We've turned, every one, to his own way. And the Lord laid on him the iniquity of us all. Let me ask you another question. Do we see our field as Jesus saw the field? Now, please understand, I'm not asking for us to enlarge the area of our ministry, but to enlarge the vision of the field of ministry that we now have. God doesn't need for us to start bus routes and, run all over Mackinac County picking up people. We've got enough right here in our area that are unchurched and lost and are scattered like sheep without a shepherd. Those are the ones we need to focus on. Now then, if we expand our field, we must also expand our force. When we get a bigger view of the field, we'll need more people on the team. Jesus said in verse 37, "The harvest truly is plentiful, but the laborers are few." You see, Jesus had an unemployment problem. By the way, it hadn't changed any yet. We still have an unemployment problem. The church was never intended to be a spectator event, and yet that's what most people in the church are, simply spectators. Howard Hendricks, in one of his books, I don't remember which one, wrote this. He said there's two kinds of people in the church: the pillars who support the church, and the caterpillars who crawl in and out week after week. God gives each believer spiritual gifts with which to function within the body, not to be spectators on the sidelines, just standing there. I remember when I was on the Dallas Fire Department, and Texas OU weekend would come around once a year. And man, people flooded into Dallas from Oklahoma. That's when the University of Texas plays the University of Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. They do it every year. They still do. And one time, way back when Bud Wilkinson who was the former coach of the OU, or Oklahoma University. He was there for the Texas OU weekend, and a reporter caught him and said, what would you say was the contribution of football to physical fitness? He just knew that would be a great question to ask the coach. The coach turned around and looked at the reporter and said, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, obviously the reporter was taken by surprise. So he asked, would you care to elaborate on that? The coach defined football as 22 men on the field desperately needing rest, and 22,000 in the stands desperately needing exercise. And man, I think that's a good definition of the church. You see, there's a few doing everything, spread thin, while everybody else is sitting there in the pew eating bonbons and watching the program. Hey, listen, we need active members, because we have a few active members and the rest in the stands are just simply watching. Jesus had some practical and spiritual answers to the problem, and they're found in verse 38. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest. We need to pray for help. I believe God's got people ready and waiting. We just need to tap into that source. In Matthew chapter 10, kind of shifting gears here, we're going to leave the text for a moment and go to another one. Matthew chapter 10. Listen to verse 1. And when he had called his 12 disciples to him, he gave them power over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all kinds of sickness and all kinds of diseases. The very men that he asked to pray to the Lord of the harvest, he called. By the way, it can be a dangerous thing to pray. Matter of fact, I have a rule in our church. If somebody comes and complains about the way we're doing something, or complains about, a ministry not being run properly or whatever, guess what? They're in charge of that ministry from that point on. It didn't take but one or two, and all of a sudden everybody goes, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not going to complain. So nobody complains about things in our church much. Well, we got one or two, but, they don't complain to me. Now listen, it can be a dangerous thing to pray. It's kind of like this little boy, Bobby, was drugged to church or brought to church every Sunday by his parents, and they'd sit there, and Bobby had been trying to learn how to whistle. And so in the middle of the sermon, he started praying, Lord, give me the ability to whistle. Teach me to whistle. And about that time, he let go with a great whistle, and he was so excited, but his parents was pretty upset. And I think the preacher got upset too, because he lost his place 3 times. Y'all will catch that next year. Okay, listen. So we must expand our field, and we must expand our force. And when we do this, we'll expand our faith. You see, as we look at the field and we get compassion and we expand our field and we bring in more people and we expand our force, as we do that, it builds our faith, because we begin seeing God doing things that we know we can't do. Matthew chapter 10, once again, verses 9 and 10, Jesus says, provide neither gold nor silver nor copper in your money belts, nor bag for your journey. In other words, with food in it. Nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor staff. For a worker is worthy of his food. Now then, my oldest grandson went on a mission trip, and part of that mission trip that he was on for 7 months, they took a journey. Now you find this same scripture in Luke chapter 10, and so they called it Luke 10 journey. And they went out through the Dominican Republic and ministered to people, and all they took was the clothes on their back and a cell phone. But guess what? They had no cell service. But they used the cell phone camera in it to document what they were doing. And he came back and reported to our church because our church helped support him. As far as sending him over there and bringing him back, we helped pay for his flight over there and back. But it's simply operating totally out of faith that God is going to take care of you. And we must operate out of faith. He had just shown them the need. Jesus had just showed them the multitude of people and showed them the need and called them to minister to that need. He empowered them and showed them that they were to operate out of faith. Now he tests them. You see, in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 40, it gives us an account. It says, on the same day, when evening came, he said to them, let's cross over to the other side. Now, when they had left the multitude, they took him along in the boat as he was. In other words, he had been preaching to a multitude in a fishing boat. And so when they left, he just stayed in the boat, and they began to row out across the Sea of Galilee. And they were going to the other side. And there was other little boats that were also with him. And a great windstorm arose, and waves beat on the boat, so that it was already filling with water. But he was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was great calm. But he said to them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Now, I don't know if you've ever given thought to that verse or not, or that text. Why did Jesus say they had no faith? Wasn't the situation real? Wasn't there a terrible storm? Wasn't there a possibility the boat would sink? Wouldn't you have been scared too? Well, why did Jesus tell them they had no faith? Here's why. He told them to cross over to the other side, not go halfway and sink and drown. Get the picture? Jesus told them to cross over to the other side. He wouldn't have said, hey, I want you to go to the other side if they weren't going to make it. See, a lot of people don't understand that God gives us commands, and then he makes sure we can carry them out. You see, we must believe that God can do whatever he calls us to do, that he is able, and that he will do it. Now, Numbers chapter 13 is a story about Kadesh Barnea. Hopefully that term is familiar to you. The children of Israel crossed over the Jordan River and was going to take the promised land. Moses sent out spies to report back, And when they brought the report back, 10 of the spies said, "Oh man, it is a wonderful land. Look at this stalk of grapes we brought. It's a land truly flowing with milk and honey. But let me tell you something. The sons of Anak are over there, and they are huge. And we are like little grasshoppers in comparison to them. So we can't do anything. We can't go in and take it." Well, Joshua and Caleb said, "Whoa, wait a minute." And in verse 30 says, Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let's go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." Now, you say, "Well, I know that story." Yeah. Matter of fact, you can ask any Sunday school kid about Joshua and Caleb, and they know who Joshua and Caleb are. Let me ask you this. Can you or anybody else name any of the other 10? That's what I thought. Let me ask you this. How big is your God? What do you see? Giants or God? Now, not only do we need to believe that God can, but we must believe that God will. Most people believe that God can do anything. Matter of fact, they blame a lot of stuff on God that He doesn't do. But they believe He can do anything. But there's very few people that believe He will. You see, God specializes in the impossible. We need to be optimistic about God. Much like the man that was in the dungeon. Let me share this little story with you, and I don't even remember where I got this. There was 2 men in a dungeon, and the dungeon had slick walls and no door. And they were shackled to the walls, hand and foot. Their hands and their feet were shackled to the walls. So they could hardly move. The only opening in the entire dungeon was one window, and it was about 30 or 40 feet above them. And the prison keepers daily would drop food down to them through that window. One man, as he was there in the shackles, leaned over as far as he could and he whispered, "Hey, here's my plan." I don't know if you get the gravity of that or not. Hey, we've got to admire him. Here he is. Most people would give up hope completely, but he had a plan. He was going to figure out a way to get out. You see, we need to trust that God can and trust that God will. Do you believe God can save you or your loved ones? Let me ask you, do you believe God will save you or your loved ones? I go to the hospital, well, not so much anymore since COVID, but used to. I go to the hospital quite often, and people would call and say, "Hey, would you come pray for my mother, pray for my wife, pray for my brother," or whoever. And I would go and pray for them and pray for a healing and all this stuff. And I remember one time I went in, and a man had asked me to come pray for his wife, so I went in and prayed for her. And I asked the man before I went in, how do you want me to pray? He said, "I want you to pray that God will heal her." I said, "Okay." So I went in, and he went in with me, and we bowed, and I prayed a prayer of healing over her, that God would heal her. And after the prayer was over with, I said, we'll let you rest now and we'll step outside. And as we stepped outside, the man said, you know what, it would be very reassuring to me if you would do the funeral. I said, didn't you just want me to pray for her healing? Well, yeah. I said, then why are we talking about a funeral? You see, he believed God could, but he didn't believe God would. And I run into that a lot. Let me ask you this. Do you believe God can build a great church right here in Curtis? Do you believe God will build a great church at Curtis Baptist Church? Or let me ask you this, are you satisfied the way it is? See, this is one of the things that I find. In churches today, it's us 44 and no more. You know how that old saying goes. People are satisfied with the church the way it is. They don't want to change it, especially Baptists. One of the favorite sayings of the Baptists is, we've never done it that way before. Well, let me ask you, do you believe God can use you in a mighty way? Do you believe God will use you in a mighty way? The answer to these questions speak volumes as to your faith. I want you to think about it. I want you to think about it the coming week. If you have any questions or comments, give me a call or shoot me an email. My information will follow right along here in just a minute. But I'd love to hear from you. Even if there's something that you disagree with me on, give me a call or email me. Hey, I've got pretty thick skin. It's not going to upset me. Just give me a call or email me. Well, think about it this week. And until then, God bless. Amen.